There are moments in life that you never see coming. Moments that change the course of everything you thought you understood. I used to believe I had all the answers. My name is Ahmed, and for as long as I can remember, my life was built on certainty. The rhythm of prayer, the traditions of my family, the familiar words spoken each day, they were the pillars of my world. I grew up in a home where faith was not just taught, it was lived. My earliest memories are filled with the sounds of prayer mats unfolding, the warm smell of my mother's cooking after long fasts, the gentle but firm guidance of my father, who always reminded me to stay close to the path laid before us. There was comfort in it all. A safety that wrapped around me, telling me who I was, and who I was meant to be. I never questioned it. Not once. Why would I? It was the air I breathed, the ground I walked on. My life had a direction, a purpose. Everything outside of it felt distant, almost invisible. I didn't need to look elsewhere. I had everything I needed, or so I thought. But life has a way of shaking even the strongest foundations. Not with a warning. Not with a sign you can prepare for. Sometimes, it happens in an instant. A heartbeat. A breath. A single step in a different direction. I didn't know it yet, but I was standing closer to the edge than I could ever imagine. Closer to something that would take me beyond everything I believed, everything I trusted. And when it happened, when I crossed over that invisible line, I saw a world I never knew existed. A world I cannot forget. A world that still follows me, even now. I was born in a town where mornings began with the slow rising of the sun and the sound of the adhan filling the air. The mosques stood tall, not just as places of worship, but as the heartbeats of our lives. Every day was stitched together by the rhythm of prayer, dawn, noon, afternoon, sunset, and night. It wasn't something we questioned. It was the thread that held everything together. Our home was small but full of life. The smell of spices drifted from the kitchen long before breakfast was ready. My mother's hands were always busy, cooking, cleaning, offering silent prayers for her children. My father, a man of few words, lived by example. He taught me that faith wasn't just about speaking the right words, it was about how you carried yourself when no one was watching. As a boy, I would often sit cross-legged on the floor, my father's deep voice guiding me through verses of the Quran. Sometimes my eyelids would grow heavy, but the gentle tap of his fingers kept me focused. One day, he would say, "This will be the light that leads you through darkness." At the time, I didn't understand the weight of those words. Faith surrounded me not just inside the home but everywhere. The market vendors who paused business for prayer. The old men gathered under the fig tree, beads slipping through their fingers, whispering ancient praises. The neighbor who shared dates with us during Ramadan, even when he barely had enough for his own family. It was all part of the same current, pulling us forward, keeping us close. Ramadan was always my favorite time. The fasts, though hard, gave each day a sense of anticipation. The setting of the sun, the crack of the first date between my teeth, the smiles that spread around the table as we broke the fast together, those are memories etched deep into me. There was beauty in the struggle. A lesson in patience, in gratitude. It shaped me more than I realized. School was different. There, the world felt wider. I met boys who dreamed of traveling, of studying far beyond our town. Some wanted to become engineers, others doctors. As for me, I didn't know exactly what I wanted. Sometimes I imagined myself teaching young ones the Quran, just like my father had done for me. Other times, I wondered if there was more beyond the horizon, beyond the lands I had always known. But even when my dreams wandered, my heart stayed tethered to faith. It was the map that made sense of the world. It told me what was good, what was wrong, what was expected. And it gave me a place, a clear role, in a world that sometimes felt too big to understand. Of course, it wasn't always easy. There were days when doubts whispered at the edges of my mind, especially as I grew older. I would hear about other beliefs, other ways of seeing the world, but they felt distant, almost unreachable. I would push those thoughts away, telling myself they were distractions, tests meant to be overcome. I never imagined I would believe in anything else. I never thought I would even want to. But life, in its quiet ways, was already preparing me. Preparing me for a journey I could never have written for myself. I never thought I'd believe in anything else. My whole identity was built around my faith. Leaving it. That wasn't even a thought, it was impossible. Or so I believed. The years passed, as they always do. One by one, the days blurred into routines: work, home, prayer, family gatherings. Life had settled into its own rhythm, different now, faster, louder, but still familiar in its foundations. I found work managing a small shop on the corner of a bustling street. It wasn't the kind of job that made headlines or built fortunes, but it was honest work. Every morning before the sun had fully risen, I would unlock the metal shutters, sweep the dust from the doorway, and greet the same faces that passed by on their way to school or work. In time, I got married. A quiet, kind woman named Layla. We built a life together in a small apartment above the shop. It wasn't extravagant, but it was ours, filled with the aroma of coffee in the mornings, and the soft laughter of family visiting in the evenings. Later, when our son was born, it felt like the world had been painted in new colors, richer and deeper than before. On the outside, everything looked right. To anyone watching, I was a man living a life of purpose and contentment. Steady. Faithful. A man who had achieved what many long for: a family to love, a community to belong to, a path to walk on without fear. But somewhere, tucked away in corners I rarely allowed myself to visit, a strange feeling began to creep in. It started small, a passing thought during prayer, a hollow echo in the quiet moments after the day's rush was over. At first, I brushed it off. Fatigue, I told myself. A busy mind, nothing more. Still, it grew. A sense that somehow, despite everything, something was missing. Not something loud, not something easy to name. It was a quiet kind of emptiness, like standing in a room you know by heart, and suddenly noticing that one of the walls isn't where it should be. I didn't dare speak of it to anyone. How could I? What would I even say? That after a lifetime of certainty, I was beginning to feel incomplete. Most days, I buried the feeling beneath the weight of responsibility. There was always a shelf to organize, a bill to pay, a child's laughter to chase down the hallway. Real life didn't leave much space for questions without answers. And yet, in the rare moments when I was alone, truly alone, it would return. A whisper inside me, asking quietly, "Is this all there is?" I would kneel to pray, saying the words I had always said, moving through the motions my body knew by heart. But sometimes, it felt like my voice was reaching up into an empty sky, bouncing back without an answer. And the more I tried to silence the unrest inside me, the louder it seemed to grow. Looking back now, I realized the ground beneath me was already shifting. Tiny cracks forming under the surface, preparing to break open in ways I could never have predicted. At the time, though, it all still felt manageable. Life moved forward. Customers came and went. Layla prepared meals with her gentle smile. Our son grew taller, asking bigger questions each day. I answered him the best I could, even when the questions he asked echoed the doubts I was trying so hard to hide inside myself. It was an ordinary life. An ordinary man living an ordinary day, until everything changed. It happened on a day that began like any other. There was nothing special about it, no warning hidden in the morning light. I woke early, said my prayers, kissed Layla and our son goodbye, and made my way down the narrow staircase to open the shop. The city was alive, as it always was, shopkeepers pulling up shutters, children racing along cracked sidewalks, the scent of fresh bread rising from the bakery 2 doors down. The weight of another day's routine settled onto my shoulders without a second thought. Sometime around midday, the sky darkened unexpectedly. Clouds, heavy and low, rolled across the horizon, swallowing the sun. I remember standing at the doorway, watching as the light shifted, strange and sudden, as if the day itself had taken a deep breath and held it. But business continued. Customers filtered in and out, their voices weaving together into a tapestry of ordinary life. It was late afternoon when I decided to make a delivery, a small parcel meant for a neighbor a few streets away. I tucked it under my arm, nodded to the man next door to keep an eye on the shop, and stepped out into the thickening air. I crossed the street without thinking, weaving through the noise and the hurried bodies moving in every direction. And then, a sound. A roar that didn't belong to the ordinary noises of the street. I turned just as a delivery truck hurtled around the corner. Too fast. Too close. I had no time to react. No time to run, to shout, to shield myself. The impact came like a hammer dropped from the sky. There was a moment, just a blink, where everything slowed. I felt my body lifted off the ground, thrown sideways with a force I couldn't comprehend. A flash of white exploded behind my eyes. The package tumbled from my hands, skidding across the asphalt, forgotten. I hit the ground hard. Pain shot through me, white-hot and absolute, tearing the air from my lungs. I gasped, but the sound was thin, broken, swallowed by the chaos around me. Voices. Distant at first, like they were coming through water. I heard shouting, someone screaming my name, or maybe just screaming. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't listen. Every breath felt wrong, sharp, like breathing shards of glass. There was a terrible weight on my chest, growing heavier by the second. Someone knelt beside me, their hands fluttering uselessly over my broken body. I wanted to tell them I was still here, that I could hear them, but the words caught somewhere between my mind and my mouth. The sky above me blurred into a smear of gray and white. I blinked, once, twice, trying to stay anchored to the world I had always known. But something was slipping. A pull, gentle at first, then stronger, deeper. I could feel my heart pounding wildly, like a trapped bird in my chest, and then, slowing. The world around me began to dim, like someone was turning down the lights one by one. There was fear, sharp and blinding, but there was also a strange sense of surrender. Not peace, not yet, but a terrible understanding that I was no longer in control. As the sirens grew louder, racing toward me, the edges of my vision collapsed inward. Faces hovered above me, blurred and urgent, but they seemed to be moving farther and farther away. The pain began to dissolve, replaced by a numbness that crept up my limbs like cold water. And then, just before everything went dark, a sensation. A jolt, not of pain, but of separation. As if something inside me had come loose, floating just slightly above the body that still lay broken on the ground. The world fell away in a single, silent breath. At first, I didn't know what had happened. I opened my eyes, expecting to feel the roughness of the ground against my back. Instead, I was floating. Above everything. Above the street. Above my broken body lying still and small against the concrete. I could see it all. The faces of strangers gathered around me. Their mouths moving rapidly, hands pressed against my chest, trying to pull me back. The flashing lights of an ambulance arriving, casting everything in a harsh, stuttering glow. But none of it felt frightening anymore. The fear, the pain, they were gone. In their place was something I had no words for, a stillness so deep it seemed to hold the entire world inside it. I felt no pull to return to the body below. It was as if it belonged to someone else now, like a coat I had outgrown and left behind. The world around me began to dissolve into something new, a brightness, pure and endless, stretching out in every direction. It wasn't harsh or blinding. It was gentle, almost welcoming, like the first warm light of dawn. I drifted toward it without resistance. And then they appeared. Figures, beings made entirely of light, emerged from the brightness. They had no faces, no voices, but their presence spoke louder than any words could. I felt their joy, their peace, as if they were pouring it into me without speaking. It was a love deeper than anything I had ever known, deeper than the love of a mother for a child, or the embrace of a long-lost friend. It wrapped around me, through me, filling every broken piece inside. I don't know how long I floated there, surrounded by that presence. Time seemed to lose its meaning. It could have been seconds or centuries. And then, from within the brilliance, a figure approached. This figure was unlike the others. There was something in him, a weight, a gravity, a tenderness that rooted me to the spot. He spoke, not with words, but straight into the deepest place in my being. A voice not heard with ears, but with the heart itself. He said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." At his words, something inside me shattered, and then healed in the same breath. The truth of it burned brighter than the sun, yet it didn't hurt. It only made me more alive. I knew, somehow, beyond all doubt, that this was Jesus. Not just a prophet, not just a teacher. There was no distance between his words and the truth itself. He was the truth. He stretched out his hands to me. In them, I could see the marks, not wounds, not scars, but signs of a love so vast that it had crossed death itself to find me. I felt every burden I had carried, every mistake, every regret, every fear, lifted from me, as though they had never existed at all. He did not accuse. He did not condemn. He loved, completely, fiercely, forever. In that place, surrounded by light and love, he showed me glimpses of things beyond my understanding. A great river of life flowing from his heart. Countless souls rejoicing, clothed in light. A place of unimaginable beauty where every tear was wiped away. I saw moments of my own life, too, not as I remembered them, but as they truly were. Every selfish act, every small kindness, all of it seen through eyes of perfect love. He spoke again, gently. You were made for more than this world can give. I have called you by name. You are mine. Tears streamed from my eyes, though I had no body to cry with, because somehow I realized he had always been calling me. Even in the prayers of my youth, even in my search for meaning, even in my moments of doubt and restlessness. He had been there, waiting, longing for me to hear him. He told me that my time was not yet finished. That there were things I still needed to do. People I needed to love. Truths I needed to share. I didn't want to leave. Not after tasting such love. But his words filled me with peace, not sorrow. And with one final look. One final surge of that endless, overwhelming love. The light around me began to fade. I was being drawn back. As I drifted away, his voice echoed within me. I am with you always. And then, everything went still. When I opened my eyes, the world looked different. The harsh white lights above me flickered, and the low hum of hospital machines filled the room. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. My body felt heavy, pinned to the bed, but inside, I was lighter than I had ever been. I blinked slowly, adjusting to the dimness, and saw blurred figures leaning over me. It was my family, my mother's worried eyes, my brother's tense face, the hushed whispers of prayer filling the space. They said I had been unconscious for days. They spoke of the accident, of the moments they thought they had lost me, of their desperate prayers calling me back. I listened, but their words seemed to float somewhere far away. I wasn't the same Ahmed they had been pleading for. Something inside me had shifted forever. Lying there, wrapped in the stiff sheets of the hospital bed, I felt a deep sadness tug at my heart. Not because I had survived, but because I had left something behind. A place where love breathed in every corner, where peace was a living river, and where I had heard the voice of the one who truly knew me. Part of me wanted to close my eyes again and find my way back. But I was here. For a reason. As my strength returned little by little, so did the questions. How could I ever explain what had happened? How could I tell my family, devout, faithful Muslims, that I had seen Jesus? That I had heard his voice and that it had changed everything inside me? The fear wrapped around me like a cold blanket. I imagined the confusion, the anger, the heartbreak in their eyes. I imagined losing them. So, for a time, I said nothing. I let the days drift by in quiet silence, smiling when expected, nodding when spoken to, but carrying a secret that weighed more than words could express. When they left for the night and the hospital ward grew still, I would reach for the Bible someone had left on the shelf beside my bed. I don't know who placed it there. Perhaps a nurse, perhaps a visitor from the chaplain's office. All I knew was that it called to me with the same voice I had heard in that place of light. I turned its pages slowly, running my fingers over the words as if they were a bridge between two worlds. The verses were unfamiliar, but something inside me stirred with each line. It wasn't just knowledge I found there, it was recognition. It was as if my soul remembered these words, even though my mind had never learned them. I wrestled inside. Every part of my upbringing, every teaching I had received, warned me against this path. I remembered the Friday prayers at the mosque, the lessons about the prophets, the importance of following the straight way. I remembered the warnings about those who had strayed. The fear of what I was becoming gnawed at me, even as the peace of what I had seen called me forward. At night, I prayed, not in the way I had been taught, but in a raw, stumbling way, full of tears and longing. I asked for guidance. I asked for courage. I asked to understand why I had been shown what I had seen. The hospital became a quiet cocoon, a place between worlds where I was being rebuilt from the inside out. Every beat of my heart echoed with the memory of that light, that love, that voice that had called me by name. And deep down, I knew there was no going back. Even if it cost me everything, I could not deny the truth of what I had been shown. I had seen him. And somehow, I knew he was still with me, even now, even here, waiting for me to take the first step toward him. The day I made the decision felt almost unreal. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, like a whisper settling deep into my bones. I knew what I had to do. I knew who I had to follow. I stood in the small church, tucked away on the edge of the city where few people knew me. The walls were plain, the windows simple, but the warmth that filled the room was unlike anything I had ever known. A pastor with kind eyes welcomed me with a smile that said he understood the weight I carried. Around me, strangers, soon to become family, stood with open hearts. The water in the baptismal pool shimmered under the soft lights. I stepped in slowly, the coolness biting at my skin, but inside, I was burning with a new kind of fire. As I stood there, I remembered everything, my childhood prayers, my family's laughter during Ramadan nights, my mother's hands on my forehead when I was sick, the life I was about to leave behind. My heart clenched with both grief and gratitude. The pastor's voice was steady as he spoke words of life over me. I closed my eyes as the water covered me, washing over my past, my fears, my doubts. And when I came up again, gasping for breath, I wasn't just Ahmed who had seen a vision, I was Ahmed who had been made new. But beginnings are not without battles. The days that followed were some of the hardest I have ever faced. Word reached my family. First came the confusion, the desperate phone calls, the pleading. Then came the anger. Then, the silence. Some friends turned their backs quietly, others made sure I knew how they felt. There were nights I sat alone in my small apartment, staring at the walls, wondering if I had lost too much. But even in the loneliest hours, I was not alone. I found strength in prayer, not ritualistic, memorized words, but real, trembling conversations with a God who knew my name. I found peace in the pages of the Bible, in the teachings of the one who had met me when my heart had stopped beating. I found love in the unexpected kindness of the church community, people who opened their homes, their lives, and their hearts to a man who had walked a long road to find them. Slowly, the new life took root. I learned that forgiveness wasn't just a word, it was a way of breathing. I forgave those who rejected me, even as I missed them. I forgave myself for the doubts that sometimes crept in during the dark hours of the night. And more than anything, I learned that love was not something I had to earn. It was given freely. It had been given to me at the moment when I had nothing left to offer. Today, I live not just for myself, but for the one who pulled me from death into life. I share my story whenever someone is willing to listen, not to argue, not to convince, but simply to tell the truth of what happened to me. A truth written not on paper, but carved into my soul. If you hear my words, if you feel the stirring deep inside, know this. You are seen. You are loved. And sometimes, the greatest miracles are not the ones we seek, but the ones that seek us. His life changed forever, not through argument or fear, but through love, grace, and a personal encounter. And now, he shares his story to anyone who will listen.
If you found this story moving, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful testimonies.